Hero and a coward feel exactly the same. The difference is how they act on their fear. This is a quote by Cus D'amato, and we're gonna talk about Cus D'amato's tips and tricks that he used with his athletes in order to make them stop feeling fear. We're also gonna talk about some psychologically proven tricks that you can use in your or before the match or whenever you're actually feeling anxiety. And let's start by saying that all of us more or less are cowards, but there are some weapons, psychological weapons and tricks and exercises that you can utilize in order to stop feeling fear, or maybe not even stop feeling fear as much as you are gonna know how to really use this feeling in your advantage. Fear is the main obstacle on your way to learning. This is another quote by Cus D'amato, and I believe it's so much. I really agree with this. And Cus D'amato really shares that if you really know how to use it, you are limitless, honestly, and you are so much more powerful than your opponents and than obviously you used to be before. And the first thing that Cus D'amato really shares is that he really ingrains this idea that I'm going to share right now, that he used to share, obviously he unfortunately passed away, that fear is something that gives you a lot of energy, and this is actually something that is psychologically proven. There have been multiple research, and if you really change this little cognitive belief about fear, and if you really start believing that it gives you power, that it really that it is working kind of in your favor, you're gonna see so much positive change, even on a hormonal level. Another thing that I've already mentioned is that fear is gonna provide the belief that you have to adopt is that fear is giving you extra energy, and the only way to really know how to use this fear, use fear in your advantage, other than the tricks that I'm about to share, is to really practice it. Practice it as much as you can. There is no way around it. You have to practicing fear and going to situations that are kind of frightening and that are not comfortable for you. Also, another psychological trick that a lot of psychologists are using, and I actually use that before my matches with my psychologist, sports psychologist that I used to work with, is that you are kind of starting to work through all the ways that a match or a game could go, right? You're talking through worst case scenario, best case scenario, and once you know all the scenarios that you are about to experience, it really dulls anxiety. So expectancy really dulls anxiety. Once you really figure it out, like worst case scenario, this is not as it's not going to be as nervous as you think, as it used to be before. This is another exercise, and it's a little bit controversial, because how much do you really want to focus your attention on the worst case scenario? But sometimes it really lifts off this anxiety, and sometimes I use it in my practice, that I just like think or try to make people think about what would be like the worst, really the worst case scenario, the scenario that you really don't, that you're really trying to avoid. And once we really dig deep into that, once you really try to dig deep into that, and once you really figure out what is it, and what if this happens, what are you gonna do? Once you figure all that out, all of a sudden it's not as frightening as it used to be. Another trick that psychologists really use, because sometimes we're not all on the same level as Mike Tyson, right? Because Mike Tyson seems like he used to be fearless, right? Because of how tough he appeared to be. He actually wasn't as fearless in his childhood and in teenage years. He shared that in multiple of his interviews. He used to be even scared to sparring with other fighters. So but anyway, not all of us are as tough as Mike Tyson and as tough as Cus D'amato would expect his athletes to be, right? So what if you are playing, right, or fighting, or whatever type of sport you're doing, and maybe even in your everyday life, right, you feel this anxiety coming up, whether it is performance anxiety or some other type of anxiety. There is this psychological trick that I'm about to share, and it's called grounding exercise. What is it? It's actually very, very simple. So first thing that you need to do is to acknowledge 5 things that you see. So for example, right now I see camera, I see microphone, whatever you see, just acknowledge it and just talk through it in your head. Another thing that you have to do is to acknowledge 4 things that you can touch around you. It could be, if you're playing, for example, tennis, it could be a tennis ball, racket, or I don't know, whatever you can touch, really, it works. Another thing that you have to do after that is to acknowledge 3 things that you can hear. Maybe it's the sound of the ball, I don't know, maybe it's just the sound of spectators, whatever it is, or maybe you're in the office, right, before an important meeting. So the next thing, as I've already mentioned, is 3 things that you can hear, and the next thing you have to do is to acknowledge 2 things that you can smell. Afterwards, you acknowledge 1 thing that you can taste, and maybe it's the aftertaste of morning coffee, whatever it is. Once you do that, what it really does for you is that it brings you really into the present moment. It forces you into the present moment, because oftentimes when we feel anxious, it's really our default mode network working kind of against us. This is like our mind-wandering place of the brain where all negativity and anxiety is really happening, and sometimes it can really get out of control when you don't really practice fear, and when you don't do enough just attention exercise, such as mindfulness meditation. It can really kind of destabilize you, right? And once you really are doing this grounding exercise, what it really does is that it helps you to force you into this present moment, because mind wandering is never about this present time. It's usually about worrying about the past or feeling anxious about the future, just ruminating over and over one thing again. And this is really great. It's not like something that is kind of like a cure-all exercise, but still it's not that bad, right? It could compete with maybe meditation and trying to breathe through anxious moment, or maybe like a prayer. For some people, prayer really works. For me personally, it does. But I'm not really forcing anything onto anyone. I'm just sharing this psychological tips that clinical psychologists and sports psychologists really know on overcoming anxiety really in the moment. And this is kind of the quick pill, right? This is the quick pill, and the really difficult pill, red pill I think it's called, right, is to go out there, face your fears step by step, controlling the situation, right, but still facing something that you fear. And that could be anything. That could be maybe performance, that could be dangerous meeting, whatever it is. And I really believe that, and I've mentioned that so many times in my videos, that Cus D'amato, I believe, is one of the greatest psychologists that has ever honestly lived. And I believe that Cus D'amato shared so much, just his little tips and tricks that he gave his athletes are just so helpful, because there are just so many psychologists out there that know the theory, right, that know kind of like clinical practice, they know about narcissism, sociopathy, and all this type of stuff, but it is so rare that people who are coaches, right, who are fitness coaches, who are sports psychologists, who actually know the things that are actually going to help, not just theory, but theory that you can really apply and that you can really take advantage of. And Cus D'amato is one of those people. It is so important to learn from people like him, and his take on fear, his cognitive the cognitive changes that he really offered to his players are so amazing and so helpful. And I actually have another video about Cus D'amato, and it's about another cognitive change. It's called, he really used to tell his athletes this one sentence that is, mind makes everything worse. And once you really ingrain this idea into your practice, it really is going to change so much. So thank you so much for watching this video. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one.